at the end, somewhere in the middle, and end with the D. That's Zainab. And it's written here just in case you have difficulty remembering what it is like.
In fact, I just had two operatives.
Would you know what quickly do this? Like small round of introductions, so we kind of understand where each one of us is coming from and what our stories are. Because our stories will help us understand other people's stories, and that is essentially what this workshop is all about. So who would like to start? Mariska will start. Mariska. But no. Before we start. So Mariska's going to tell us her name, Mariska, and then she's going to tell us why she's here, and then she's going to tell us something about a movie that she's seen that she would like to be part of. Okay? And anything else that Mariska would like to add.
Okay, so my name is Mariska. And
Hello, Mariska.
Hello, yes. I'm here with the Blue Yonder and also doing a research on understanding travelers' perceptions. And my favorite movie that I want to be part of? Okay, at the moment it's Totoro, which is a Japanese animation movie that I recently saw that is really great. It's full of magical elements and
Anything else?
it's very cute trolls. Anything else I want
Cute
to say?
trolls?
No, not at the moment.
Trolls?
Yeah, you would
Cute?
think that's scary, but they're not. They're really cute.
Okay, works. Gopi, you wanna go? Okay.
On to me. My name is Chris. I was born in Denmark. My mom is American Danish. My dad is Norwegian Danish. So a little bit mixed. That's the story itself. Yeah, pretty much. I study in the Netherlands, and now I'm here as my second day as an intern. So it's still quite new. Thank you very much.
So which movie do you want to be part of?
Which movie? Maybe Into the Wild, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I know, but maybe I could alternate it a bit. Not that part. Oh, before that, yeah.
Me.
So my name is Ludivine, Ludivine, French name, and a movie I should be part of. So many movies. First one. The first that comes in my mind is the last one I saw. That's into the country of honey and blood. That's not a funny movie. That's about the Sarajevo war.
Okay, my name is Raj, Raj Gamali from Nepal. I got a booth over there, so afterwards you can come there if you want. Social tours. We work with the Blue Yonder through the green circuit. So there's a huge stories out there as well, long stories which will come tomorrow at another thing that I'm trying to do. Thank you very much. And I don't know, maybe movie. Never thought about this, but probably a silent movie.
Dawn 2.
Yeah, probably a silent movie because I talk too much right now. So it's better that I try out doing things non-verbal.
The Artist.
Yeah,
The Artist. No, maybe.
Dawn 2.
No, what was that? What was that Malayalam one? The Tamil one?
Vikram.
Hold on, Pushpak Vimanam. I'm choosing the movie. No, I'm just asking the name. It's Pushpak Vimanam. This is a comedy, a silent comedy. That's really good.
Pushpak.
That's really good. Yeah. No, I don't really care. I just need to be silent. Yeah, that's right.
Maybe you wanted to become that beggar with lots of money.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, Pushpak. Yeah.
So you have to have your own.
Okay, I'm Anya. I'm here with Atmosphere. Atmosphere is a climate protection organization. So we are offsetting emissions in renewable energy projects all over the world, kind of, mostly in developing countries though. And yeah, if you'd like to visit us, our stand is right over there. So you're always welcome. Little advertising here. Yeah, and my favorite movie I'd like to be part of is definitely The Artist. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, we'll remember that.
I'm Melanie. I'm from Marshall Wernick and Andere. That's a communication agency, consultancy focused on sustainability and credibility.
Sounds great.
So storytelling, I think storytelling is really important to get listened to get heard. Favorite movie I want to take part in? I don't know yet. So
No, you have to give it a thought, come on.
there's nothing in my mind.
How can that be? From your childhood, yeah. Or maybe from the last, maybe like an
There are
adventure.
only films I don't want to take
Okay, that's a
because
fun
they are
as well.
that bad.
Which is the worst one? The
Like
worst of them
Dumbo,
all.
for example.
Which one?
Dumbo from
Okay.
childhood, that's very terrible.
Yeah, that's a childhood trauma of mine as
Okay, I'm gonna. This is also noted. Not to watch. Not to watch. Okay.
I'm Lisa. I'm here because I'm hosting the Blue Yonder crew at the house. So they also
Thank you,
wanted to
Lisa.
host me at their house. The movie I want to take part in is The früher stirbt ist länger tot.
Wow. Gonna be a cat?
No, the cats died. No, it actually made me want to be a Southern German, and that's very special because I'm North German, and we hate each other's cats.
Some intercultural love here.
Really? So what is it about?
It's about a small boy who's doing all kinds of weird, funny things. But the funny part about it is the language, because they have this really thick Southern German accent. So it took me like, yeah, exactly. So it took me some time to understand what they actually say. Yeah, it's fun.
Okay, that's great. And good morning, everyone. My name is Zainab. Still Zainab. And the movie that I would like to be part of is Harry Potter, because I think it's very, very cool. And I don't know what that is. Is that a movie? No, but Harry Potter definitely. Or maybe Lord of the Rings, like something nice, adventure.
You can choose only one.
Okay, Harry Potter. I choose Harry Potter. So Harry Potter is what I'm going to be part of. I'm here because I particularly think that stories are extremely compelling, they're very powerful, and that's what helps us understand our lives and connect with each other. And I think that's great, because what else do we really live for, right? So, and anything else about me, maybe, yeah, I don't like mosquitoes and I like bubbles a lot. Okay, coffee. Okay, so now that we know a bit about each other, at least we know our names and we have a fair enough idea of the stuff, that the kind of movies that we potentially would want to be part of and that the other ones that we don't want to be part of. I just want to start this session by trying to understand where we all came from, and at the same point of time what storytelling actually meant for each one of us, right? So if I just look at like the word storytelling, so we have like essentially two parts, the story and there's the telling. So we're going to look at the telling a bit later and just focus on the story for now. And so I would like to know from you that what do stories mean for you? Like, is there a specific reason that you're here in terms of like trying to understand? Like, I understand from your perspective that maybe stories are powerful, right? You use it as a communications tool, right? Is there any other ideas of what stories essentially mean? Because here at the Blue Yonder, we use them as a product. We think of them as a concept. We think of them as an art, a skill. We think of them as a process. We think of them, as technology. We think of themselves in multitude of terms. So is there anything else that you would like to add to the mix?
I think in tourism, it's always the stories are the most important part, because that's what flows. No? I mean, if you, for example, travel now to Berlin, you're going to go back and talk to your people, talk to your friends. It's all stories that you give, right? And based on those stories is when they will come here as well. So stories form a very important part of tourism. And I think what is, for me, very important is to try and learn skills by which those stories can be more compelling. But then you can sell, right?
Good point. Anything else to add? Any ideas? Okay. Seems that we have nothing else.
This story is powerful for atmosphere. Is it useful for your organization?
Definitely. Stories plus pictures.
Stories plus pictures.
Yeah,
Good point.
so that people also can see what is actually behind those whole stories. Right? Pictures are very important.
That's great, and I think especially it would be interesting because Atmosphere is a sort of technology-based organization, and to demystify the technology into a story which connects.
It's pretty difficult,
Right.
so it's easier for people to understand how the whole thing actually goes. If they see pictures and they see the story behind it, and they have like a structure to combine this picture with the what's actually behind it.
Okay. Hello.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
You got to select a movie now. That's how
Okay.
it works.
You have to introduce who you are, what you do, and then you have to tell a movie that you want to be part of. If there is a chance.
Any movie.
Any movie.
Any movie which is strong, powerful, compelling for you, so much so that you wanted to be part of it.
Oh, I just saw a movie recently, and I would love to be there. It was The War Horse.
What's it called?
The War Horse.
The War Horse.
It was nominated for the Oscars and stuff like that. Yeah.
Good movie.
Basically, I love horses, so it's all about horses. My dream in life is to own a horse, not anything else.
Okay, that's not much of a dream. We can work on that.
So, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, I'm Commander Samuel. I was in the Indian Navy for about 25 years. I was a pilot in the Indian Navy, and the last few years in the Navy, I met up with Commander Thomas. Found that we shared some common interests, like he was into nature and I was into a bit of adventure, and we decided to quit the Navy and start a company. And that was in 2000. And Kerala, we didn't have much of adventure activities at that time. And when we started it, we thought that year two we are going to be millionaires. Unfortunately, we are still waiting. But yeah, but it was good. Yeah, but it was good. And over the last 11 years, we have made a lot of difference. We've done well. And yeah, I don't make as much money as I would have as a commercial pilot, but I'm much happier doing what I'm doing now.
So, what's your story?
What is my story?
Yeah.
You got to tell a story.
We want to know who you are. We want to know if you get a chance, which movie would you like to be part of?
Would I like to be?
Which movie you would be like to be part of?
Oh God. Maybe adventurous movie?
No, you need to name a
Name the movie.
Yeah, you have to choose. You have to name.
Name the movie?
Yeah.
Should I tell the name what I think, or just the name of movie what I saw?
No. A movie which you like that you would like to be part of. I mean, you would like to be in real life be part of that movie.
Okay. My Way to You.
What is the movie about?
It is not real movie. It's just my movie.
I mean,
That's even better.
real storyteller we have here.
Okay.
Okay, so we were just talking about stories essentially, not the telling part of it, but just understanding what stories essentially consist of. And to begin with, if anyone would like to volunteer to start a story, or I could tell a story. Does anyone want to tell a story? Does anyone know an exciting story that everyone must hear? Something that happened to them which was random, which was exciting, which was provocative, which was crazy, which was wild, which was unheard of, which was unpredictable.
Lisa, your bus driver story.
These are the bus driver story.
Technically,
Go on.
it's not that wild. Well, it's just about my current bus drivers. I wanted to enter the bus and get a ticket because I had to take the U-Bahn, and U-Bahn you're normally checked for.
Raise your voice.
Old people standing.
Okay, I'm living in Berlin in Neukölln, and Neukölln is basically known for being very dangerous. Like, people wouldn't want to go there because it's sketchy, scary. Yeah, people from outside.
Yeah, people still think that.
So the bus drivers there, I mean, people that are there, they don't always obey the rules. So the bus drivers, they don't really care. Whatever, get on the bus, buy a ticket, don't buy a ticket, they don't care. So I got on the bus and wanted to buy a ticket because I knew I would have to transfer to the U-Bahn where you need to have a ticket, and I didn't want to miss my U-Bahn. So I wanted to buy a ticket and entered the bus, and the bus driver didn't want to sell me a ticket because the bus in the front was just really crowded, and he was like, no, in the front you can't enter, please enter in the back. I was like, yeah, but I don't have a ticket. He's like, please enter in the back, don't come here in the front. I was like, yeah, I know, but I don't have a ticket, like, I need a ticket. It's like, gosh, don't you understand? Like, if the front is full, you just don't buy a ticket and you enter in the back of the bus.
And you didn't have a ticket then?
No, I didn't have a ticket. I just said,
What's your
he
name
didn't
of
want
this
me
place?
to.
What is- yeah,
sell me the
what
ticket.
Crazy. Does anyone else have a story? Anything at all? Any tourism related stories? Story. Okay, then let me tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a
Oh,
story that I've
okay.
never told anyone before. Okay, and that is the Blue Yonder story. So, also, I think one of the things that everyone should keep in mind is that a whole lot of us actually have a sort of relationship with the company because we worked or have been associated with it. So this is going to be a little bit of my interpretation of the story, and that's important as well because this is my story of something else. So where did the Blue Yonder story actually begin? Essentially, if you look at any civilization, it is built around a water source. So like the greatest cities of the world, even like the smallest localities, a lot of it is just around water. So there's going to be a little river, or there's going to be a pond, or maybe a stream, or if nothing, a sewage. There's always like some sort of like water source about a place. And the Blue Yonder story for me begins in India. So we have India. This is India. You can see India, and then the south of India, which is Kerala, which is where the Blue Yonder story begins for me. And in the south of India, in the north part of Kerala, is a little river called Nella. And that river is special because that river is dying. And that's important as well to know because when a river dies, the civilization around it also dies. It collapses over a period of time because people move away, like the culture and the traditions of the areas are lost. And that can be very disturbing for people living there. As when you go there and you see a river dying, you think that, why aren't people doing anything about it? This sounds kind of strange. It doesn't make any sense because, I mean, if you lose your water source, then you're pretty much doomed. But surprisingly, you figure out that people honestly don't care. And that kind of gets you thinking that why would people not bother about a water source, which is important to them? And then you realize that they really don't have a relationship with the river. Like, they don't care about the river anymore. Like, the river's like, your mother's cooking. You only miss it when you're away. The river doesn't matter to you anymore. And that's when you start to discover that maybe there is something wrong in this, entire relationship. Like the symbiosis of like knowing something and doing something with something in a relationship that you have, an interface, interaction is missing. So what do a bunch of us do? We go and we start collecting stories around the river. So we ask people, what is your relationship with the river? Like, did you ever play around it? Did you do something at the bank? Did you do something naughty around it? Or did you everyone has a story, right? I mean, there must be something in the river. Like maybe you went on a boat, maybe you made a boat, or maybe, at one point of time, you were doing something that your mother caught you and you have these like memories. And when you start asking people those questions, people have stories, surprisingly. And who are the best people to ask? Like the oldest bunch. Because sometimes they really have nothing to do. They're just sitting around and, relaxing. So they're the greatest people to go to speak to. And you ask them, and then because they have so much time at hand, and they have a very wild imagination, like we mentioned, so they offer you these stories. And these stories are brilliant. So you listen to them. And we said, okay, so we have all these stories, let's record them. We started putting them down and we realized we have story after story after story, and all these multitudes of stories are like superimposing on each other and creating a different story completely. Because and as you learn about the story, your relationship with someone else's river completely changes, because you start looking at it with that perspective, and you start realizing that this is not only a rich experience, it's also a meaningful one for everyone involved. And if it's meaningful for you, it's going to be meaningful for someone else. Because as we were talking about even the movies that we liked, it was interesting because like we want to know, okay, what is this movie about? Or maybe, oh, the artist is great, maybe we should go watch it. Or like the fact that you created your own movie, I already have a story in my head. I don't even know what your movie is about. So for the Blue Yonder, for that river, for me particularly, that story is important simply because it helps me define a relationship with someone else's river, a river that I don't particularly have a relationship with. I have no history, I have no background, or nothing that connecting me to that river. And that river essentially became a sort of a myth for me, which became real in the form of stories. Now we have all these stories, and we were like, okay, what do we do with these stories? Because essentially we had some money, and we used that money to build these stories, and now we have no money, but we have a lot of stories, and what should we do with these stories? So we said, let's tell them to people. How can we tell these stories in powerful? Because these are powerful stories, so the content is great. Now we just need to work on the telling part of the story and tell these stories in a way that they matter to people. And that's when I think that's where the birth of the entire Blue Yonder, the organization and the concept is from. And if we are at all able to deliver a story in a powerful way that builds a relationship of someone who's alien to that community with that community. And I think that's one of the big lessons of storytelling, and that's, for me, a big lesson from this story. So is there any other story that you think, that you could think of when I was telling you about this story? Anything at all?
Let me tell you one.
Okay, great.
Like I told you earlier, we started this company in 2000, hoping to be millionaires in 2 years. The only thing is that we didn't have any money to start the company. So we went around and asked a few people, why don't you invest in this concept? And they said, you must be crazy. Adventure is for Himalayas and not for Kerala. So there was no luck there. So we started the company with literally no money. So where do you employ people? You don't have people to employ because anybody qualified in adventure activities had to come from outside the state and you had to pay good money, and we didn't have the money. So we did the next best thing. We picked up youngsters off the streets, literally. People who are working as head load workers in the port rest, those kind of guys in the age group of about early 20s. So you want to work with us? So what is it about? So it's about adventure. It's about all these things. We have no idea. And their educational qualification was very low, so they couldn't speak any other language but Malayalam, which is very complicated anyway. So, but they joined us, and we started training them. We trained them in English, we trained them in activities, we slowly built them up, and over the next 2 years, we sent them to NOLS, we sent them to HMI, Himalayan Mountaineering Institute, and we produced a product which was fantastic. I mean, our clients were so happy to meet up with somebody who's come from that background and who's now leading them. And that is when we realized there are concepts like responsible tourism, sustainable tourism. And we realized that that's what we are doing without actually knowing about it. And we have our camps at various places, contributing to the local community. And today, like they are talking about, so we got a very happy situation wherever we operate because they like us. They're happy that we are operating there. They're happy that we are bringing in business for them. And in return, we are happy because they support us to the fullest. So basically, one thing we've learned is responsible tourism, sustainable tourism, ecotourism. All these are not concepts for marketing. These are concepts for living.
Yeah.
I mean, it need not be per se for tourism. It could be the way you live. It's Nila. I mean, they did not start this project as a tour company. Basically, it is being responsible to the environment, to the nature, to the people around us. And you don't have to be in tourism for that. You can be an individual doing anything. And that is something which people need to understand. Unfortunately, today, these are concepts which companies are using as a marketing tool. I mean, you go to any company, you find that responsible tourism, and we are doing that. We are doing. They don't believe in it. They're doing it because it sounds good. I'm also there kind of. Tomorrow, if you can do without it, they'll be very happy to remove it.
No, but then that gives us a bigger question in terms of like, are your stories convincing? Like, are your stories real? Are your stories authentic? Are they raw? Because I think that's where it essentially, because I mean, every act of promotion or every act of marketing is essentially you telling a story in a different format. So when she spoke of pictures, for instance, so a lot of people use technology or maybe like audiovisual means. When you watch a movie, essentially it is a narration of a story through audio video. That's what you're doing, and which is why I wanted to start with the movie, because if you found a particular movie it captivated you, there must be a reason, and you felt that. And you felt that story was interesting for you. So if we go back to our movies, is there anything that about the stories of those movies that was captivating for you, that was interesting for you? Like why it is that movie?
I just thought of another point.
Yeah.
Perhaps I could add it.
Yeah,
concerning your story. I thought about, we worked a lot on sustainability reports. I don't know if you all know them.
Like
big
GRI?
Companies, like following GRI, big companies which have reports concerning their environmental, social and economic issues. And yeah, we came up with the point that no one seems to read them. So who should read them?
Yeah.
And I thought of the employees while you talk, because you asked what do you think of? And if you
for example, if you let employees tell their stories, I think other employees would also be interested to get to know the stories.
Right.
Like persons around Blue Yonder, they will also be interested in the stories of the older ones also living there. So I think this works in many different ways.
Yeah, especially when you focus, like we change the storyteller completely. Like who is the storyteller? Who's the person who's telling the story? Which is a lot of stuff that we do in the sense that like you let the community speak for itself. Because who better to tell the story than the community? Because every time you're going to open your mouth, your story is never going to be as real as someone who's actually experienced it, right? Are there any other components of like you think like certain stories that you've heard of which have been interesting for you? How good? How good? So let's go back to our movies. Is there anything else that we can think of that was interesting in that movie? Interesting enough for us want to be part of that movie?
I think for me, what I enjoyed so much about the movie, to be honest, it's a child's animation movie that I'd never seen it before, and it's very famous in Japan. It's like one of the children's movies, and it's a lot about the relationship between reality and dealing with some difficult situation in reality. Like there are two little girls and their mother is in the hospital, so they don't see her much. They're at home, and then they moved into a new house close to the forest. And there are all these like, they think there are ghosts in the house, it's haunted, and there are these like ghosts in the forest and stuff. Somehow the way that they interact with them, it becomes very supporting for them, because it makes it able for them to use their imagination, and the movie doesn't make a point on what is real and what is not real. It leaves it in between on purpose because it's a child movie, right? But what happens is that by using their imagination and by somehow making sense of the reality they're going through, they manage to cope with their mother's illness.
Right.
And that is something that captivated me in the end, because at the end I didn't get a message about, okay, are the little like dust bunnies in the house real or not? Or are the cute trolls in the forest real or not? That wasn't the point of the story. So okay, what was the point of the story? Oh, actually in the end they got through this difficult situation through the magic, whether you don't know whether it exists or not. And interestingly also there in that story, the regular adults, like the grown-up people, they don't believe necessarily. They don't support their children's fantasy beliefs, but the old people do. Like there's an old woman who comes and helps them clean the house and stuff, and she would just like wink, like dust bunnies. So you see again the relation with the old people, they have very much often this like connection to this more like it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. The point is like how does this story help you to process, to understand the real world around you, and which makes it a reality what you're going through, which supports the reality you're in. And I found that very captivating.
So, from what I understand, tell me whether I'm wrong. So the story was emotive. Like it was emotive enough for you to relate to a certain extent, which kind of like took you into the movie, right? The story was imaginative because it kind of like really pushed certain barriers or limitations that we set in our head and made you challenge those. What else? Anything? So we have emotive, and we have, what else do we have?
Imaginative.
Imaginative.
Very much also. It was also reality. It was the girls' reality, what they were dealing with.
Okay. So I will put that in as well. The story was a certain element of reality. So real.
Not only fantasy. That was important. I think if it would have been only fantasy.
That's a good mix. I want to come back to that point later about the fantasy and the real thing, and just to see where the border between fiction and non-fiction lies, especially during our using storytelling for tourism. We come back to that. What else? Any other elements which were exciting in the story?
Not necessarily this story, but the movie that you liked.
I took the Into the Wild, and I think it's a little bit the same elements actually, because it's also this escaping the norms and values of society, and what can you do and what can you not do, and then figuring out what do you want to do with your life, and then taking your life into your own hands and doing it. And I mean that's basically what the movie is about, but it's projected in a very beautiful way, I think. And
I'm going to take inspiring from that, just to see. I mean, you have a storytelling experience, and you're inspired enough to it kind of, you have a thought in your mind, and that takes it a step ahead to be able to say that what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing, and make you want to think about it. So I'm going to take inspiring from that. Anything else from your stories?
A good story, I think, should have a meaning or a real message. It's not just about anything, but a real message to convey. To convince, to make people think.
It's important to have a message. That's good. We have a message now to the entire mix of different stories. What else?
It also have to have a beginning
the beginning, the problem, some problem or some part which about it's the same as the message, right?
Yeah.
And the conclusion about this message or about this problem.
Okay. So we have a plot. What else?
Protagonist. We need one person to relate to.
Yeah,
There's
a
this-
person or an animal
Yeah.
or a
There should be one
anything,
person
yeah,
who's
a
the main
character.
character who guides us through the movie. There's a very funny clip on YouTube that makes fun of the first Star Wars movie. So not the fourth, but the first one that they made like 6-7 years ago. So.
Yeah.
And they basically make fun of the movie because they go through it and saying like, okay, this is the worst movie ever for all kinds of reasons. And like one of the ones that I remember most is that it does not have a protagonist. They ask, who is the protagonist in this story? Is Anakin? No, because you don't see him until after 45 minutes into the movie, you know? And they go through every character. Is it like, whatever, like name a character, and then you see like, no, what do we know about this person if you cannot say their name, their costume, or where they're from, you know? Describe his character, and everybody's just like,
Okay, central character. We need a central character. What else? Ludwig.
Second character.
And secondary characters.
Obviously, because there is no. You need someone to bring the first character. Obviously.
So you need primary and a couple of secondary characters. What else do you need? Lisa.
The setting,
You need the setting.
the environment.
You need the environment, because sometimes the story is about the environment more importantly than the character, and the character's job is to bring that out. So you need the setting. What else do you need? So we have a plot, we have a setting, we have primary, secondary characters, we have an understanding of the story being compelling, inspiring, imaginative, real. What else? Is it all that we need for a successful, exciting story?
I have not seen film, but you didn't talk about motivation.
Yeah, we spoke about inspiration, but motivation is also important. They're brothers. So we need, there is a word for that, a sort of an inflection point. So when there's a climax in the story, there's always going to be a climax in the story, or anti-climax, or both, depending on how exciting the story is. So, and that's when the motivation element comes, because then there is a climax of the story always has a dangling carrot. And if without the dangling carrot, the story will not stand. You need a dangling carrot. You need like some sort of like forked path. You need to be able to understand that maybe a choice.
It's a morale, no?
Yeah.
So there's a motivation.
Exactly.
But it's different from inspiration. Inspiration is what we get.
Yeah.
Motivation is what the protagonist,
feeling.
why he entered that story in the first place.
Fair enough.
And which is, I think, really, like, for example, like tourism or like your story, you know, like part of your own motivation is of joining Blue Yonder has to do with also why you're telling the story, you know?
Exactly.
So that's
Which
more
is
like
that
your
also
own
brings
point
to
of
her
departure.
point, yeah. Okay, so there's one more thing missing. So we have motivation.
Freedom.
You have?
Freedom. We need freedom.
Rhythm. Yes. You need rhythm. You need rhythm. So you need. Explain that.
You can't tell a story like just a line. You need something like you need to have a story that evolves. You need to give it some freedom. So otherwise the captivation will go. So you need that rhythm to get the captivation, to captivate your audience.
Exactly. The flow.
Yeah, the flow.
Then you have a great mix. So if you put it together, you have a huge mind map. So if you can look at it as a mind map, though I cannot make it right now, you'll see that you have essentially all the components of a good story. So now if you have a good story, now the question is that how do you actually project that story? So we have one perspective from her where she said the storyteller is important. That if you change the storyteller, the story changes. So like everyone here, in spite of us being related to Blue Yonder in some way or the other, everyone has a different story. So I'm sure Mariska has a different story, Blue Yonder story, Gopi has a different Blue Yonder story, Ludwig has a different Blue Yonder story. We all have a different Blue Yonder story. So that's one perspective, is point of departure. So who's telling the story, right? The other one is the way the story is being told. So would the story change if I was using puppets to tell the story? Or would the story change if I was perhaps telling the story on radio? And how would that story be different from maybe a story that I was doing in a one-act play format? So the format or the way you produce the story will change what the story essentially means. And that becomes slightly more important now, simply because the processes or the methods we used to produce stories before aren't the same anymore. with like technology, you can actually like I mean, the other day I played this video game. I don't remember. Yeah, so the story is a performance now. You know, I mean, you can experience any story based on simulation. So the entire idea of technology has really moved the story. One of the examples I would like to give in here is like one of the Italian company called Edge Farm Ventures, which has essentially made a book and there's a complimentary mobile guide. So it's a guidebook of say maybe the city of Venice, and I go into the city of Venice with the guidebook, and then it says that if I send a SMS to this, I actually get information which is live about maybe things that are happening there, or maybe like history or something there's more that I like to know, because a guidebook can be this fat and a guidebook can be this thin. So there's a very, very thin guidebook that they provide to you, but they give you these complementary ways to kind of engage in a more live and interacting way with the city. So I mean, there are a whole lot of people who are kind of like leveraging technology to change the way the story can be told. And now, if we have stories and if we know how to tell them, how can we use them? So if there are all kinds of people. There's like an organization called Atmosphere. There's an organization which is doing sustainability reporting. How can we use these stories? Like, I think one of the examples that you gave is great. That you ask the employees to tell the story. Because if you tell the employees to tell the story, half your work is done, right? To a certain extent, because you can keep trying to convince people, but like once it's coming from the right source, the source makes all the difference. So like how do you think we can potentially leverage the use of stories in the field of tourism? Any ideas? Or any examples?
It's always about finding common ground in a story, because if you tell a story to someone and they can relate to it in some sense, then I think you can also convince them about things, and you can even tweak the reality if you want to.
Right.
Because if you find common ground, I think it's easy to impact people.
And you think it's different, like depending on who you are? Like, say if you're you're a small company, so you may be like it's easier to do that versus being a bigger company and telling a story, or is it different?
People about something, your story?
No, I mean the dynamics would be slightly different, right? Depending on who I am when I'm telling the story. So like one of the things that I want to bring in here is trying to understand whether the person, like say if Tourism for All is telling a story, that story might just be different from maybe like a different company which is telling the story. And will my representation of who I am change the story in itself, and how will it change is the question I'm asking. So one is finding common ground. I think everyone has to do that. Like no matter who you are, you will have to like go out there and like actually seek common ground to make your story captivating and compelling. But how else can we, like if I am, say I am a Gap Adventures, how do I do it? How do I tell my story differently from versus like Tourism for All? Like will there be a change in the way that I am telling my story or not? Or it's the same?
Can I hook on to a different point
Yeah.
that Christopher made?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
he's talking about common ground, so that the person you're telling the story to has to be able to relate to it somehow.
Yes.
And that's, for example, like I think that's really important when we're talking about how to actually use the stories when we're talking to people. For example, if there's a story about Kerala, the first time I came there, I didn't understand a lot of things because I wasn't familiar with a lot of the local language words. So if people would refer to a city or a place or an art form or something like that, I was lost because I didn't have the context yet.
Yes.
So I was a totally different kind of person than somebody who's maybe already spent 10 years of their life being totally captured by Kerala and knows everything, When they come and you would tell them the same thing you told me, for them it would actually be like too little new information. For me it was too much. So that really depends on who you're talking to. And that's important on like figuring out when you're telling something on a website or when you're telling something in a in-crowd travel magazine or like a general newspaper or on a blog or a Facebook or like a folder that people take with them maybe on the holidays. Also, if if you're a tour guide, for example, it's good to know a little bit about the travelers that you have. If you I guide in Berlin also, and if I know that the person is already familiar with certain highlights, then I can dive immediately deeper into the story of that highlight. I don't have to tell them, this building is called the Brandenburger Gate,
Yeah.
But it's good to somehow, you have to know how to relate to the person you're talking to, and for that you have to know a little bit about them. Who are they? Where do they come from? What do they want to know? What do they know already? So that you can actually connect with them with exactly the kind of information that is not not too little, not too much for them? Like exactly the kind of step that they're interested in learning next and relating to next.
That actually brings us to the former point in terms of like the components of the story length, because I think the longer your story is, the faster you'll fall asleep. So yeah, definitely there's context, but there's also length because and that I think touches flow as well, because without that the story won't stand. So we have the point of common ground. So irrespective of like who you are, you need to know enough about the opposite person to be able to like go all the way and be able to communicate your story. But are there any other dynamics involved? Because I really think that like if you are let's say perhaps a more local company, the story that you'll have is going to be much more different. It's going to be more likely to be more micro versus a story which is much more macro. And both stories work. Like a lot of people say that maybe only micro stories work because essentially you talk about one person and that one person is taking you through the story versus the macro story where you have story of the world and people tell you those stories as well, and that's exciting as well because you're actually setting something up.
Setting is the whole world.
You're actually setting the entire thing up. So I think to a certain extent there is going to be a difference. I think if we had like perspectives within the audience from maybe like a bigger company, we would see that difference. But other than that, I just want to bring one point, like how do we make our stories more authentic? How can we do that? What are the means to do that?
How do you make something more authentic? And it's authentic or it's not authentic?
Yeah, which is the question, right?
Well, something I would like to add is going back to your question on how difficult or easy is it for a small travel company to tell its story. Probably it's an authentic story, but because of lack of resources, they can't really reach out to the public. And to what extent can you use social media and all these new media technology to reach out to the audience? Or at the same time, there is this perception that just because you are big, that you can't be responsible.
Yeah.
So is that really the case? So for many big companies, they actually struggle a lot to convince people because people don't believe them. A big company handling about 5 million travelers in a year, can they be responsible? Can they be sustainable? Is that possible?
Yeah.
So one interesting thing that I would like to understand is that to what extent can storytelling be used as a powerful tool for conveying who you are? How can you use it as a marketing tool? So one of the challenges that travel companies like us, the Blue Yonder, faces in the industry when we go to the market is, I've heard recently an online platform came up in the US who said they are going to showcase only travel companies who've been certified or endorsed, or those companies who have won awards. And we have won, a lot of, about 15, 20 international awards in the past 7 years. But at the same time, this woman who started the new company, she said, we want you to be endorsed or certified by someone else. And I said, we are not really, into the certification stuff. But you can look at all the travelers' feedback. You can look at what our industry partners are saying. You can look at organizations like ITB Berlin that decided to choose us as a responsible tourism partner. And she was hesitant because we don't have a certificate from one of the internationally known global brand. So what we believe in the sense is certification is not really the solution to say how authentic you are. So this is again another challenge for us in the sense of how can you really use storytelling, because to reach out to the audience, to reach out to the B2B market, to reach out to the B2C market. Like 7 years ago, I remember when I first went to Paris 6 years ago to promote our company. The question was, who are you?
Yeah.
Because no one knows our story. And the second one was, there are so many operators from Kerala or India knocking our door literally every month here. So why would we choose you out of other people? So how do we know that you are not just a new mushroom that came up in the last monsoon? Because a lot of travel companies come up. There's a lot of people in the startup line.
Yeah.
The starting line is very heavy, thick, but then there are hardly any guys who actually survive the first 5 years or 7 years. So how we entered the market was again by telling the story.
Yeah.
Because when I first went to meet this beautiful boutique travel operator in Paris, the first question he asked was this, so what's your story? So now I give back I asked this question back to all the tour operators whom I go and meet in the past 7 years. The first question I ask is, it might be a supplier for me, it might be my source market guy, but the first thing I asked him or her is that, what's your story? And you could see they are totally lost because they don't have a story. So people like us who built the whole company based on inspiring stories from destinations, we slowly managed to convince travel operators to start working with us. So it's very important to have stories. But now the whole challenge is in this whole world of certification, how can you successfully position your inspiring stories to convince the travelers to travel with you, to convince the B2B operators to do business with you? So if there is any recommendation from anyone, that will be a great takeaway for me from this workshop.
No, because that again brings us down to the question: how do you make a story authentic, right? Because again, it's the question of verifying that story. Because you can tell a story, but people, the challenge of believing the story will only come when the story will maybe like for instance, when she mentioned that when employers are telling the story, so one of the things that potentially could happen is that we could allow when you're visiting maybe a new destination, we allow people to speak for themselves. So if you're talking about maybe the responsibility quotient of maybe a destination, or maybe the sustainability, if you question the sustainability of the tourism initiative, you let all the stakeholders who are part of the initiative speak for themselves, and perhaps that's the most honest feedback one can ever get, potentially. I think that's maybe.
So is that also a way to get involved with multiple stakeholders in your business to tell the story?
Yes, because otherwise the story is incomplete. It's just going to be your story, and for your story to really connect and your story to be really all pervasive, it will need to have all sorts of perspectives, and that's what's going to be the entire experience of a traveler's experience in a destination is only going to be as meaningful and as rich as the stories that he's going to hear. And if you're talking about perhaps this cell phone, and we go down to the story of the cell phone is just not the fact that I use it. The story of the cell phone also comes from the fact that somewhere maybe in Vietnam someone produced a small little chip to make it work, and that's what makes the story of the cell phone so fascinating. And I think that's what's true for every tourism destination. When you go there, everything from the weather to the guy who's driving you to a particular destination, and his story will make a difference to the entire.
The whole supply chain story.
The entire supply, because without that, I don't think it'll hold. And I think that's where even the question of responsibility comes in, right? That if you claim at all to be responsible, the only way you can prove that is when people have an experience of responsibility. People experience responsibility and sustainability in everything that they're doing on a regular basis, from waking up in the morning, going to a particular destination, experiencing something, and to be able to talk about it to other people, saying that this is what I experienced. I was going to say something, but I forget. Yeah.
But it's a way of verification also, no? If you have the different, if a traveler can inform itself from different people's perspectives, different stakeholders' perspectives, it's also a way of verification. What in the end, certification also aims for. If I'm a traveler, why do I want to look for products that are certified? It's a trust thing. It's a transparency thing. I want to know for sure that if somebody says that they're doing responsible or sustainable tourism, that's not some greenwashing, that's actually really true.
Yeah.
And so certification is set up in such a way that it serves to create a kind of decision-making facilitation in order to ensure that you're really going to buy a product or buy a trip, basically, that is really what it says it is. So there are many, for small operators, certification can be very time-consuming, it can be incredibly expensive. There are also ones that do it in a smart way, it's fine. But the end goal of it, in the end, is not to create a lot of documents and to get a stamp. The end goal is that somebody who wants to travel can already inform themselves in advance about the transparency of the product, basically. And then also can experience that themselves.
No,
so that's where the story, if the story is told from different stakeholders' points of view, which can also be a way of communicating the story, if on the website only the owner of the company is telling their story, that's nice, but what about the people who are the drivers, or the people who are the hotel owners, or the people who are doing an activity or so? They should also get a voice and get a way to tell. And that's a way of informing people in advance. And then when a traveler goes and travels and actually meets these people live, they automatically are verifying whether it's true or not what the company is claiming.
No, it's a great accountability system for the company in itself as well. Because like then you really don't need someone like ABC to come and like say that okay you did this right, you did this wrong, you did this right. I mean the company in itself has a more sort of objective outlook into like everything that it's doing.
It's on the table. It's difficult to see and to hear on this computer. Just put it on the table.
Keep moving it.
I can't do that.
So the entire idea of having an authentic voice also comes just from the fact that like even within the company you help verify your own processes, your own means. At the same point of time, there is no necessity left for anyone else to come and verify you, because the moment your story spread, automatically like there are watchdog organizations, there are media organizations, there are like any third-party sources who will come and check any which way. So there is absolutely no need for like actually going and like getting all these stamps saying that yes, my voice is truly authentic.
So are we saying that rather than going for an expensive, complicated certification system, it's probably better for a traveler or a business partner to choose someone purely based on the claim made by the operator, as well as if they could also see an opportunity where the communities on whose behalf that travel companies or hoteliers might be making the claim can be checked by the travelers, and then third or fourth parties like the media, they come in and verify it, and then that makes a good story that is convincing.
Yeah, because I mean, it's simple. Like in the sense that if there is a restaurant which may be a Michelin star restaurant, and like if your friend comes and tells you that he had the worst food, then you will not go, because references matter. Or like the other way around, where you see like a fantastic review and you see that this is a fantastic experience, and if like someone tells you that they didn't, they had an alternative experience there, you're rather going to trust the word of mouth. And I think like that helps you, because like the story, because your friend, the reason why I think like one of the things in storytelling is that one of the reasons why you believe people, or the reason why you relate to people, is because you've had a significantly similar experience, or you've had like a relationship of trust, which is a bit like on eBay, right? Because where you pay for stuff, you don't know whether it's gonna come, and no one is gonna stamp it, but because it works, like it works. You don't need the stamp or the verification because the system works, and I think it's a bit like that. And I think if people start investing in storytelling from the very beginning, it makes your work much more easier, because in the end, like a lot of people want to use storytelling as a means to kind of communicate, and then they are desperately seeking for stories, like bringing up stories, making up stories, just to kind of like put something together. But I think if you like constantly you start working with that approach, and it's a process that begins from like A to Z, that just makes the entire process of verification, authenticity, credibility, and accountability of the story much richer experience for everyone involved.
I have a question for you. So we've been discussing about the compared to various certification. There's a lot of certification, more than 100 certification going around the world. So compared to a certification process, how powerful is storytelling to convince your buyers?
I think this is exactly where I was coming from. Because this is what we do with the audit. Is actually telling our story, But of course, it's a combination. When you tell a story, it's a combination. When you're talking about responsible tourism, it's a combination of facts sometimes, which is just like numbers, pure numbers, crunching stuff, that is required to be done, accounting stuff, and then converting that into a nice little story, which actually makes the traveler actually, interested to read it, Because if nobody reads it, it again doesn't have a lot of value, because it needs to be read, and then people have to appreciate it. So yes, I think this is more important, because eventually, it's the stories which actually pull people. That's what I was trying to get at now. And how responsible you are and what you're doing on the responsibility front is better told by a story than a little stamp. Stamp doesn't say anything. There's no story behind.
Why the clients or traveler require this authentication certificate? Why they require?
Because there's a lot of problems with trust, no?
Yeah, and competition.
So establish trust, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
It's time consuming. So if you don't go through it,
Yeah.
it is not necessary to go. But you have to convince, or somebody give the guarantee about you. Who can? What is client are afraid of when they paying something and some amount, they are worried because they are buying something which they won't see before.
Yeah.
So they advance the money, and they don't. At that time, they have no guarantee whatsoever. You're telling story, very nice story, very right story, But now there are so many storytellers with linguistic facilities. Can anything and convince the people.
Yeah, manipulates.
Yeah, it's just
No,
manipulative.
we won't use that.
We don't use that word. We don't use that.
No, the other thing is, travel is very customized, you see.
Yeah.
Travel is so customized that if you put a stamp, a green leaf or something like that, it doesn't actually say anything about what your particular interest is,
Yeah.
Mariska probably traveled to India because she liked culture or something, or she wanted the folklore or something, And if she had that story on the folklore, that will actually compel her more than seeing a stamp out here which doesn't say anything about what actually goes on inside.
Yeah, it's not like a coffee,
Exactly, it's not like coffee.
Certification is good for coffee. You stand in the supermarket, you have to choose a...
So certification for travel is the worst thing. That's what I think.
No, even in the case of certified coffee, the whole story is about the beneficiaries. Like
actually, even in coffee, that's what I mean. My wife is now working in coffee. I'm actually trying to work on the concept of actually reporting through stories rather than certification, because in Nepal it doesn't work, because the fair trade label actually requires plantations. In Nepal, there is one guy which comes with a cup like this, coffee. So he has a story that is more compelling to the person drinking the coffee, because he says, the guy came like that, than to see a fair trade logo.
No stamp business. If why to ask? You convince with your story, or be truth. Don't say anything you don't feel it to listen. Don't tell. So automatically, people who are looking for this type of tours, they are not thinking like white collar, or they are always looking after there is a bank guarantee or no, or something like that. What people block is that it is not that if you narrating all your description about the alternative travel, so they know what you are writing. So thereafter you have to convince, they read your people who have already traveled, but now everybody is behind the certification. So if you don't go, or new one doesn't try, so he has.
No, but I think it's
he must have very good patience to achieve his goal.
No, the whole thing rests on the fact that, do you want all the business? That is ancient, you can't have all the business. You only can get a certain number of business, and that business always exists. You just have to go there and find it. The certificate is not going to help you there. I mean, you actually have to go and find it anyways.
And tell the story
Certification
powerfully.
only means that the people who look for the certification, let's eat on that pie, That is one pie. The other people out there, go for the other people. It's all right. You don't have to go on the same pie.
Now there is just two castes. One with the certification. Now there are two castes. One is certification and one is non-certificate. So whoever the clients who go to the certificate is authentic agent, they will say, mind. It's the same people. We are talking same thing about tourism, ecology and everything. But when we are competition with the same type of tour, we will say, but just check they are authorized or not authorized. That's all. It is we, nobody else. Same thing in other tour. So we start with that. Somebody has certification, not certification. You choose, you see what we are doing and go with us or go with anybody else. Like that.
Funny thing also
That courage. That courage you require to say, you don't go to Mr. X because just he is authorized or they have stamp. Just you go what they are doing.
Yeah. But the funny thing is also, in the end, there are so many different kinds of certification that you can, as a customer, you have a new
business.
problem. Which certification do I trust? And then you start looking for the story of that certification. Who made it? Where did it come from? Why? What is the motivation? And again, you're into the storytelling, so you might as well just start with the storytelling.
The certification protect against what? Is your certification protect against what? That you are genuine?
I think you're certifying that you might just have an enjoyable experience, and I think you can do that with storytelling, because essentially
that's
all
a good
of
one.
storytelling.
We have a certificate of enjoyment.
Yeah.
This is enjoyment certified company. Let's do that.
Certificate.
Green circuit. Enjoyment
we are not authorized agents. We can
our own certificate.
We guarantee enjoyment.
We get the certificate of them. We are traveled with this organization, and this is a certificate.
Yeah.
Not as a just comment. We were happy like travel trips or something like that.
Yeah.
Just our certification, that will be more valuable than that authority. I don't know whether they have gone to the sea, what exactly we are doing. Just they listen what we are telling and some figures they will give you. But in that case, we will say that our client, they give a certificate and that certificate we will communicate to the others. That's all.